Hey guys, welcome to another East Coast Rams podcast. I am one of your co-host Ashton here with my awesome co-host Zach. Happy bye week. Long needed, long overdue, however you want to say it, Zach. Very much needed. After our first 9 or so games. How you feeling?
Hey, I'm feeling great. I mean, it's good to have a bye week. It's nice just to take a break, not have to be super stressed about what's going to be happening on Sunday. You kind of relax, watch the other games, see what's all happening. Um, yeah, I mean, couldn't ask for a better weekend. It was nice out here. The weather was nice. Got to go outside, so got to really enjoy the fall weather that we got going on here. How about you? How's your bye week going?
Uh, It went fine, got to do a lot of stuff, got some big things I wanted done at work done. So, good personal achievements. Fantasy, I went 1-1. So, in our league, Zach, I won, and now I'm only one game back. Uh, and, you know, what can I say? I started off 2-4, and now I'm tied for second place.
Well, I'm still in first. I also won,
Rub it in,
um,
rub it in.
yeah, a lot going on there. But it's been fun to do this fantasy league with you and with the rest of the crew that are doing that. But let's talk about Rams. I mean, it is bye week, but there are still some Rams news that are coming out as we enter into Week 11 officially. Now that it's Tuesday on our recording date. So first things first, let's talk about there is some news that came out today. We'll get to that because I think that'll be more of a decent conversation. But so we did get Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is officially now an LA Ram. He has signed with the Rams. But really this week, I mean, that was almost a week ago. And now we are actually hearing from Sean McVay. He had his Monday presser yesterday. And, he came out and basically was like, it was their chance to upgrade the quarterback room. Now, again, why they didn't do this weeks prior, not really sure. At least a week prior. But I think, some of the reporting that's coming out, I think it did give us some insight into what actually happened. Because even in, there was a lot of articles that were saying that sources were saying that Carson Wentz was actually reaching out to the Jets.
Jets.
After their, kind of abysmal loss and was trying to check in with them because, they are more of a playoff contender. And if you remember last week, that's what I thought. I wasn't thinking that this was a Rams sleeping on Carson Wentz. It was Carson Wentz just wanting to be with a team that was going to be a contender in the playoffs. Jets kind of basically turned him down. So he decided to go on with the Rams.
That is nuts with how bad Zach Wilson is playing. And
Yeah,
Zach,
and maybe it has to do with Aaron Rodgers. Again, Aaron Rodgers is that kind of quarterback who's like the spotlight's on him, and he's planning on coming back in a month now. And so I don't think he wants anybody else to kind of come into that quarterback space.
doesn't matter if you lose 4 or 5 more games and you can't make the playoffs in the AFC. Like, I just think you do what is best for your ball club in that moment. And I understand Aaron Rodgers has a big personality, but he's gonna be able to deal with it. Like Carson Wentz, again, what I was gonna say is kind of like he hasn't lit the world on fire in the last 2-3 years, but he's been serviceable, he's been solid, and he's been a lot better than Zach Wilson. So a little nuts that you would kind of turn that down when your team feels like it has all the pieces. You're just QB can't throw down the
Yep.
field, can't make basic reads, and Zach Wilson hasn't grown at all in his last 3 years. So I think it's a good pickup by us. Like you said, long overdue. I honestly think coming out of camp, and we said this, we did not like our backup QB situation. We thought Brett Rippon and I liked Bennett, but like once Bennett became unavailable, like Brett Rippon wasn't going to be it, and we knew that, and they just kind of wasted a roster spot on him. Sadly, say like you knew what you had in him, and just I think Wentz is somewhat of the same thing, but at least he has a higher ceiling, higher floor, and maybe he does a miracle comeback. It's happened before in the NFL, but we'll see how he does in a better offensive system than he's been in.
But let's just hope that that doesn't have to actually come to fruition. Sean McVay, again, during his presser, said that Stafford should be good to go for week 11. He can grip the ball, he can throw the ball, so good progress there. So this is really just kind of as a, really as a backup. Situation with Carson Wentz. So the real question become, like, after this season, do you think the Rams will want to keep him as a backup, and B, do you think Carson Wentz will want to stay as a backup if he gets zero playing time?
I think it depends if he plays this year at all. I feel like if he plays, he will, and the Rams, and it's not because Stafford is out for like a season-ending injury or like if he basically plays and Stafford is going to come back next year, I think if he does good enough, he'll be kind of like Baker, if you know what I mean. Kind of like a team looking for like a Washington or something like that. If one of these rookies kind of completely falls off, maybe even the Panthers, you could see them bring in a veteran to kind of like right that ship and try to make it more stable. But if he doesn't play a lot, I do think our culture will kind of keep him around potentially, as long as the team doesn't throw him a crazy payday, which I don't think they will. So,
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think he would serve as a good backup. I don't, obviously I would rather have Stafford come in and stay in and stay healthy. But if we keep Wentz, it allows us to not have to focus solely on trying to find Stafford's replacement next year. We could find his replacement next year, but he could still be in that learning phase. Like, we could then carry 3 quarterbacks knowing that, if something happened to Stafford in 2024, we have Carson Wentz as a backup on top of whoever potential we could get, if depending on where we fall within the draft. Obviously, if we're on the higher end of the draft where, we're picking up, a good pick, that's a different story. But as we said, quarterback really, some people debate about Stafford, but realistically, there's other positions that we really could focus on outside of quarterback. And so it's just it's all a game that we're going to have to play. But we have to have a healthy Stafford at the end of this year. If we don't have a healthy Stafford by the end of this year, you better believe that we're going to be looking at the quarterback position going into the draft.
yes. So a lot of the QB conversation kind of depends on his Stafford and his health and how confident team is. I think right now, if everything stays as it is and they're going to play Stafford next year and he stays healthy, I expect this team to kind of look at the end of the first to probably trade up from the second to try to get a QB that falls. There's a few QBs like Bo Nix, Shadir Sanders that are going to be like late first rounders that are quality. Like in other drafts, they would go a lot earlier, but just because of how top heavy this QB draft is, and how the first round is going to shake out, I definitely think this team will end up going QB in the first 2 rounds if everything stays as is and they try to get someone to sit behind Stafford for a year or two. Uh, you you gotta like start preparing for life after Stafford,
For
especially
sure.
with the injury issues in the last 2 years.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
if, like you said, if we bring back Wentz, even with the rookie, I would be perfectly fine with that. I think it only helps the room to have all 3 there.
Yeah, for sure. So some other news. Let's talk a little bit more about the injury updates. We did get a lot because of this bye week. It did allow us to get healthy. As we already mentioned, Stafford looks good to go. We should be getting Ernest Jones back. We should be getting Rob Havenstein back. So our offensive line should be much stronger, almost
Hunter
as
Long.
strong as it was week 1. We're going to get Hunter Long. He's been activated to the 21. They're very cagey about if he would actually play this week, but he is at least back on the 21-day window from IR. Bobby Brown, the third, he's also going to be returning and is expected to play in week 11. So kind of some big updates. Obviously, we said this last week on the podcast. Kyren Williams will not be eligible to be back from IR until week 12. It's not 4 weeks. It's 4 games. He has to be out for that. So bye week doesn't count. So we will not see him until week 12. But Sean McVay had a lot of good things to say about Kyren Williams again in his presser yesterday, just about like him missing in this. He feels like he's a core player to this team, and we saw that for the first several weeks. But he had a lot of good things to say about Kyren Williams, just about his presence and his presence not being there. Just, it's not the same without him. So that's good things to hear, and we're really wanting him to come back, and that'll be another big week in week 12. Any thoughts about us getting some of our key players back?
I think Havenstein is a big one. Again, shuffling that line all around. It's nowhere near as bad as it was last year, but it's hurting. It's still hurting us a good amount. So
getting Ernest Jones back, our play caller on the defense. Yeah. Now Fuller did a really good job kind of keeping in things, and they played pretty well against Green Bay on defense. It just, again, when your offense isn't keeping on the field, you're going to have problems. So he did an admirable job of making sure the play calls were being called. In Ernest Jones is missing his time. So, but it's definitely glad to have your main caller, just like, your quarterback. You got to have your main play caller back and ready to go. Other big news, Rams sign Keir Thomas to the active roster spot and waiving Zach Van Valkenburg. He has a very cool name. What are your thoughts about this? I mean, I know Valkenburg wasn't necessarily a standout player, but he did have a few pretty good plays that really helped the defense out.
First off, I think he's going to get added back to practice squad. I would be surprised if he isn't, but
that's assuming someone doesn't pick him up. Maybe the Seahawks want to pick up somebody else. We'll talk about that in our preview part, but
yeah, that's just petty, but whatever. Keir Thomas is good. Zach, I don't know, like, just looking at the last few games and then looking after really week 3, we were getting torched by tight ends. And now, again, it's hard to tell because sometimes the coverages, it's more on the safety, the cover, pick up the tight end, sometimes on the linebacker. You don't know if the cornerback was supposed to leave them or not because we play a lot of zone. So it's hard to tell when you don't have like the play call on your screen and you can tell exactly. But for the most part, I think it was a lot of blown coverages by our linebackers. And they were also not being great in run defense either. So it's like you're getting slashed on both fronts, especially by tight ends, and it wasn't good enough. And so they're trying with Kai Thomas, a player that this coaching staff has had around for, I believe, the last few years, and we'll see what he has on the active roster.
I really hope that he does come back on. I do hope that that Von Valkenburg does come back to the practice squad, only because again, was he the most standout defensive linebacker back there? No. But he did have some good plays. I mean, he did get a sack on Carson Wentz, geez Louise, Jalen Hurts. He did do a couple of those tip balls that we did get back as a interception. So like he had some decent plays that he was out there. you go look at seeing how many times he actually made a tackle was very far and few between, whether that means he blew the coverage or what. So just knowing that. But Keir Thomas, he had a pretty good preseason, so it was kind of curious to know why he didn't even get an active roster spot. Because when you looked at him, he had 2.5 sacks and 4 quarterback hits. Again, it's preseason. You're not always facing, tier 1 offense, but just knowing that, it was kind of interesting that he didn't even get a spot because he did play pretty well in the preseason.
Yeah, I think it was one of those things where they must have been more comfortable with Falkenberg in coverage. That's my only guess. Or they thought they needed more of a coverage linebacker than a blitzing one in that spot across from Ernest Jones, which is funny because they've been blitzing more this year. So, I don't know.
Well, and I mean, I don't know. Do you think that they would shift some people around a little bit? Do you think that, we would, bring Hoyt maybe on the inside and, put Keir Thomas on the outside? I don't know.
Maybe I would think more that they're more likely to go down to a one linebacker set and start bringing more safeties on the field. 3
Well,
safeties
then
instead
that's
of 2.
sure. It just seems weird I guess whatever. It is what it is. All right, moving on. Rams are also been in the news quite a bit about trying to potentially add some more players to their team. And they seem to keep losing out on specifically cornerbacks that keep getting waived off teams, and they keep trying to pick it up and then can keep getting kind of dissed on that a little bit. But one current spot that I don't think has been picked up yet is running back Michael Carter from the Jets. He was recently released, and he's kind of the latest potential possibility for the Rams. What's your take on this? I mean, we do have Kyron Williams coming back in week 12. I think Ronnie Rivers is beyond that. I don't know if they've actually specifically give us a timeline on his. And right now we got, we got Henderson, we got Freeman. So where do you see us with that?
So I think you have to look at the connection with Michael LaFleur and the Jets. So this is a player Mike has seen up close and personal. And I thought, because I've had Michael Carter in fantasy, so I've watched a lot of his games. And, he's a great receiving back. Not the best down like the middle, but solid, very serviceable. And his blocking was terrible at the first start of his career. But near the second half of last year, he started getting a lot better, like pretty solid. I would say probably better than Freeman. I don't know about probably worse than Henderson, but I like Gaskin. I wish they would have let him stick around a little bit longer to kind of get his feet under kind of get himself used to the offense. But they cut him, so I don't know if they're gonna pick up Michael Carter. I feel like Royce Freeman is a little bit just bland. You could probably get a higher upside player in that spot.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. I do like Darrell Henderson. He's a very reliable workhorse. He's able to get you the yards that I think you need. What I think they're trying to look for is they're trying to look for that passing threat, and I think that's what Carter kind of brings to it, and especially
Yes.
Carter under LaFleur. You go back and you look at the 2 seasons that he was with them. It was like 77 catches, almost 700 yards. Or 600 yards. It was just over 600 yards. And that's what he would bring if he did come to LA. He would be more of that, kind of the receiving threat than anything else. But but that's what Matthew Stafford loves. I mean, and that's what Sean McVay loves. He rather have a passing offense than he would have a running offense. We've seen that in honestly every game except for the Green Bay game. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. But it would be a very interesting pick. I do agree that it would be an upgrade to what we currently have, but with Kyren Williams coming back, if currently you're with Kyren Williams and Darrell Henderson, that's a pretty decent combo. But having Carter in the backfield would be good on my book as well.
I think he's an upgrade over Henderson. I think he's a better version of Henderson, to be honest. Henderson, you get slightly better blocking, but like Carter can be explosive off of catching the ball.
Sure. And I think that's where I'm coming from is like, you always have to balance that threat of, is he a good pass catcher, which Henderson's a decent pass catcher. Running the ball, it's kind of hit or miss. It kind of depends on if his window's open, but usually he can get about 4 yards or so if push comes to shove. He's not an explosive player though, like you mentioned. If you're looking for Henderson to get you 10 plus yards, he's not your guy. That's just not what Henderson does.
He doesn't break first contact.
No, and he can get you that kind of extra yards just by kind of reaching, but that's about it. But he is a great pass. I almost think he's underrated for his pass blocking. Like you go back and watch some of those blocks that he did. Like I mean, it is really good that to have a pass blocker, and it's really important when you have a quarterback who has been going through some injuries recently, and you need someone to be able to protect him because he is literally the last line of defense to Stafford. So just something to think about. But no, I think this would be a good pickup. Anytime we're trying to improve the weapons around Stafford and his protection, I think is great. We didn't really talk about Hunter Long when we talked about the injury stuff, other than he's going to be reactivated. Do you think he's going to be? Is he going to bring something to the room? Because like we got him from Jalen Ramsey trade, but we have Higbee. We just signed Higbee to an extension. So where do you see Hunter Long in this offense?
I mean, he could get a role. I mean, let's be honest. Outside of Higbee has been decent at blocking, but he hasn't been great, and he hasn't been great at being like running routes, and like he hasn't been getting open and hasn't figured into this offense at all, even when Stafford was there.
Well, McVay did comment after the game last time was he's playing with some sort of injury. Doesn't necessarily make him not useful in the offense and something that would hold him back, but he's not something in his, I can't remember what it was, but something like in his hand or something that made it hard for him to catch a ball, but he could still block, things like that. When you're playing through some sort of pain, you're going to make those kinds of mistakes, but but again,
don't start him if he can't catch. That
don't pass to him.
Well, it makes completely where the coverage doesn't have to go towards them.
Sure.
The defense.
But I mean, but no one knew that. I mean, obviously that came out after the game. The defense did not know that he was playing with an injured hand. Now now anybody may know that he's playing injured, but
but his play hasn't been pretty for 4 or 5 weeks. Like it just hasn't been great. Like because I've been paying attention to him. Mainly because I was trying to pick up a second tight end in fantasy, and I was just like, he's not even he's not running routes correctly, or not correctly. Sorry, he isn't getting open.
I'm going to be really disappointed when Hawkinson goes on by because I have him in both my leagues. And I have Higbee as my backup because literally I don't know who else to pick up other than him. So it's going to be interesting when the Vikings go on by. But
long way around. What I'm trying to say is I think Hunter Long, one of these backup tight ends, while Higbee's going through this struggle period, you have opportunity to get snaps and do something with those snaps. If he will or won't, I have no clue. Like, we haven't seen anything from this guy since he's been traded. As fans. I mean, you don't really have connections inside the building, so like we're kind of going in blind, and I'm like, I like the idea of him, but I don't haven't seen him play, so don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and everyone's curious because this was part of the Jalen Ramsey trade. Like, is he going to actually bring something to this offense? And we've yet to see it, but maybe here in the next couple of weeks, depending on how things play out, we may see more of him going down the rabbit hole. So, lastly, as far as our news, before we get into our preview part, is the Rams are moving to a new practice field. So there you go. There's the rendering of the new temporary practice field. So they're building a whole brand new temporary facility so that they have their own facility and that they're not playing at Cal Lutheran anymore, which they've been playing there since they moved to LA in 2016. It looks beautiful. They're already starting to develop it. The fields are already kind of set. They're already starting to grow grass. They're playing on grass fields. Practice on grass, play on turf. We won't go into that war right now, but
I
this
think this is
looks
kind
cool.
of indicating they're probably going to put grass inside of SoFi.
Maybe, but then you have the whole like World Cup debate. Like they're not hosting the World Cup anymore because they refuse to put grass in SoFi. Like
I think
it's just
that's probably a part of this, to be honest.
maybe, but again, like why would you turn that down if you were already planning on putting grass in your practice field? Because this wasn't we thought about this
Well,
2 weeks
this could
ago.
be now a reaction of that because they were probably planning this separate from the World Cup stuff, and then
But those negotiations fell like a month or two ago, or like 2 months ago. I think it would, I don't know, to make that kind of shift would be kind of interesting. But again, this is temporary. This isn't going to be their full-time facility. They're basically going to have, I think, temporary office space and scouting buildings and things like that, kind of things on trailers temporarily. They're going to try to get this thing up and ready, obviously before the 2024 season. And I believe, let me just double check, but I believe it was by OTAs that they are trying to get this accomplished. But it's going to be in Woodland Hills. I did forget to mention that. So yeah, it's gonna be
it's nice.
interesting. So any thoughts about the facility? It's got two big old fields.
Nicer facilities, impressive free agents, and I don't know, Zach, but next year's supposed to be a pretty big year with free agents, right? So
That's right. That's right. So I mean, Kroenke has almost 100 acres of land to make his dreams come true. So we'll kind of see how the Rams continue to play that out, but really excited to see what they have. They've needed their own facility. I mean, if you're going to have a team for the future, you're going to need, you're going to need the facilities like that. And I know Cal Lutheran has been really great for them, but they need their own space. They need their own facilities. They need to have their own stuff, so they don't have to have. I know this is only temporary, but it's a different kind of temporary than moving into somebody else's house.
Yeah. Okay, Zach, you want to preview the Seahawks, the 6-3 Seahawks against the 3-6 Rams? After that first game, Zach, if I had come to you and told you, hey, next time these two teams play, one's gonna look like a contender for the NFC, be I think the third seed in the NFC, and be on fire, and the other one will be borderline out of the playoff race, potentially on the verge of getting a top 5 pick. after that first game, I would have been tempted to be like Seahawks maybe, but gosh, what a difference a few weeks make, huh?
Yeah, and I think you got to look at their schedule. I mean, their schedule is completely different than our schedule was. We go up against the Cowboys, we go up against the 49ers, we go against the Eagles, we go up against
Steelers.
the Steelers, which are now also a 6-3 team. So, um, you know, you got that going on you, but
A gauntlet.
you look at our schedule and it is a lot tougher. The Bengals, and you look at their schedule, and their schedule, I don't know. To me, it looks different in our eyes, a little bit. I mean, they had against us. Obviously, we faced them. We beat them. They came out and they did beat the Lions, which are a 7-2 team right now. They are a really good football team right now. But they did overcome the Lions, or they did beat the Lions. The Panthers, they beat the Panthers. It's the Panthers. They beat the Giants. It's the Giants. They beat the Commanders. It's the Commanders. They beat the Cardinals again. Not shocking. So when you look at their biggest challengers, it was the Lions, the Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens. You go by that schedule, they are
They
2-2.
lost all of them but Lions.
No,
Right.
they beat the Browns.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah.
So they're 2-2. If you look at the hardest teams that I think they've faced, 2-2.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Seahawks were surprisingly good last year. This year they're exactly not exactly. I would say they're slightly worse offensively, and I feel like people are less caught off guard. I think Geno Smith is kind of showing his lack of ability to make like critical keys and like big situations.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part. We'll see because they're typically like have had rocky ends of their seasons last few years, and um, man, we have to win this game. Like,
We do absolutely have to win this game. I kind of like to take a quick comparison to kind of their leaders versus our leaders. You look at Geno Smith. I mean, Geno Smith has had 196 completion or of 300 completions, 2,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Okay, you compare that to Matthew Stafford, who we know he obviously did not play one game, was injured pretty badly on it feels like a couple of them, but he's 166 for 278, 2,000, just over 2,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Um, you look at their running backs, Walker, 145 carries, to Kyron Williams, who is still our leading back with 97 carries, 595 yards, 456 yards. Again, we haven't had Kyron Williams in several weeks. So I mean, we're comparing. I mean, it's kind of hard to compare because we haven't had a full season, but they both have 6 touchdowns, and Kyron Williams hasn't been playing for several weeks. Like, what does that say about their team a little bit? And then you look at their receivers. Their best receiver is DK Metcalf with 37 receptions. Puka Nacua has 64. He has 300 plus more. Puka Nacua has 300 plus more yards than he does, and they have the same touchdown ratio. Just because we cannot seem to ever get a touchdown, it feels like these days. So I mean, when you compare those, like it seems like we have the better team, but we also have an injury problem. We don't know really how healthy Stafford is.
I would say personnel wise, we're a better team. We just can't execute. We've had one game, Seahawks week 1, where we had good execution for the whole game on both sides of the ball. And I feel like for defense has been more consistent execution wise. It's on the offense. It really is. Offense
With it,
just some games you'll have games where they have problems with drops. You'll have games where the wide receivers aren't running the routes Stafford is expecting. We've had games where a wide receiver is just, like I said, can't even catch the ball. Don't know why.
Well, we have had
We've
times where our coach decides he doesn't want to run the ball ever, and we're just pass heavy the entire game.
I,
Lots of different reasons of why. I mean, your points are exactly. I'm just saying, like, I'm adding to your points. Like, we've had games, like, every game is just, it's something different that's a problem. And we never can have that cohesive game other than the week 1 game against Seattle. What I hope the Rams don't do is they don't try to overcorrect their problem this week. Let's
they
just
tried to
take
run
it back.
against Green Bay. I mean that.
But you also know, I mean, it's I don't want to go into the running debate because that one's harder because you know that you don't have a quarterback to throw the ball. So you know that they're going to run more than they're going to throw the ball when you have rip it. But my point is it was just adding to your point is, you know, there's just something that's gone wrong with this offense every single week. And this week they need to not overcorrect. I don't want them running the ball 100 all the time, but I also don't want them throwing the ball all the time. Like I just want them to go back to their roots, and I want them to like not overthink things, not try to force things because we need to win this game. I want them to take a step back, and I want them to kind of like just mentally prepare themselves. Like they just need to play the game.
I think a big problem is kind of like that mental aspect of like I feel like McVay doesn't just want 3 yards per carry. He wants that running back that can hit that 20-30 yard run at any moment. And I think that's why he levitated towards Kyron, because he was starting to get those chunk plays every so often.
Sure.
And so like McVay's like, well, I'll give him a chance. And at least I have an opportunity to pop 30 with this play, and it makes it easier on me as a play caller. Where with Royce and, as we said earlier with Henderson, like, you know what you're going to get out of that play. You're going to get 2 yards, 3 yards at best. So, like, something about McVay is like, I don't want to deal with, like, doing it just to do it. And he's gotten
But
a little
you heard
worse.
the offensive line. The offensive line is calling for some sort of balance, because if they always have to pass protect, they're putting themselves weaker on themselves.
Then run
Like,
block better. They haven't been run blocking good.
again, I don't disagree. I'm just telling you why this should be. Again, I just go back to, like, I feel like there needs to be some parity, because
I agree.
the offensive line is just saying, hey, like, we can't just run the ball all the time because that's going to wear us out because we're pushing. And then when you're saying, well, you also can't say they're passing all the time, because then you're holding back, and then you're getting pushed back. It's just, again, it's one of those things where you got to be complimentary. And I think all fans don't want to see 3 plays that fail and then 3 pass plays that fail. We want to see some mix in there. When something's not working, let's change it up. And I feel like sometimes we don't change it up. We just try, or we always play like we're behind, even though we're not behind. Things like that. I want them to stay the course. Sean McVay is amazing coach, and I want him to continue, but I also want him to also get creative again. I feel like we've lost some creativity in our offense. It's not as fun to watch. Occasionally, maybe once or twice a game, we'll get a really good pass catch, and it's awesome. But then we go off and we couldn't even kick a field goal out of it.
You didn't like that Benny Skoranek jet pass?
The jet sweep? No. I mean, no. Like, give it to. I mean, I know Tutu has not.
Creativity.
I know, but like, man, Benny Sko, like that's. I get what you were trying to do. You thought you were being more deceptive than you were, but like, you need someone a little faster. He slipped a little bit, which didn't help his case at all. But like, we need to disguise it better or something. I don't know. Honestly, the play that, like, when Stafford got injured, that play, like, that was a cool play. Yes, he got injured, but like, no one would have. Everyone thought it would have been really cool if he didn't get injured. Like we would continue to talk about it in a positive light, but because he got injured, that play is now like dead in
It
the
was
water, and
bad
it's like a poison.
execution. It wasn't
Well,
thrown correctly.
sure, but he still caught the ball and still got the 2 points. So
You don't want to put your QB in that type of situation. If you're going to call that, you better have that execution down. Because if he throws it like right in front of a linebacker and your QB gets nailed, then bam, you're out of a QB. Like, it's just putting him in an unnecessary situation. And like, I don't mind that if you have the execution down. And like, you see that with the Dolphins and the Eagles sometimes, like, they do these trick plays and it's just on point. And same thing with 49ers. Every so often they do trick play and it's on point. I feel like this is historically under McVay. His trick play usage has been atrocious,
I think some of the
in my
problem just
opinion.
becomes. I agree, the execution is poor, but you're also like I am sure when they did this in practice, it was flawless, and that's why they chose to line it up because they knew it was. But again, when you go up against practice versus a real game, things change. Tutu Atwell, he was not ready to be an NFL quarterback to make that throw. He isn't. So I feel like there's more pressure on that player, and so when you're executing it in real time, it's different than executing it in practice. They probably saw the execution was great, so they had it as a design play. But then when you go back and you're doing it live, the pressure is just completely different. The atmosphere is completely different. The fans are completely different than what you're probably anticipating or hoping for. So I don't know. There's a lot that goes into it. I like the creativity of the play. I don't like the execution of the play, but I do like the creativity of the play.
Yeah, I'm fine with creativity as long as it's a surefire way not to put your QB in danger and you execute, and they failed to do one of those. So
Yeah.
it sucks, but hopefully they get back into the lab and we start working on that and we can win next 8 games. Zach, that'd
Let's
be
hope so.
optimal. Optimal.
Real quick before we wrap things up, the only two, the Rams obviously did nothing during the trade deadline. Wasn't really expecting it, other than we got Carson Wentz, so there you go. The Seahawks also picked up a quarterback. Not sure you know of him. He's only played in a couple NFL games of his career, but Rippin, I believe his name is. Brett, I think is his first name.
That's a big pickup, Zach. They needed a backup QB. A lot of potential things that could go wrong with Geno Smith, and Rippin's last game was something to behold.
It was. Pete Carroll. He loves to pick up players to try to, get their insights. So Brett Rippin, he's on the practice squad for the Seahawks. So we'll see how that plays out in this week's battle.
See, we can be irritated, Zach, but if someone picked you up and gave you 50 grand to give you insight on pod, like.
Do you don't believe that? I know, yeah, I get what you're going there, but do you believe that the Rams probably would have picked Rippin back up on the practice squad if he made it through the waivers?
I hope not.
I'm just curious, like, if he would have cleared the waivers, do you think the Rams would have brought
Probably.
him back at least on the practice squad?
I mean, for some reason, the Rams love certain people, and the front office just won't let go of them until their dying days. It has to be beaten into the ground that a certain player is not it or isn't a good option for that team build. So maybe.
But in all seriousness, the Seahawks did make one decent move before the trade deadline, and they acquired defensive lineman Leonard Williams with the Giants. Seattle sent over a 2024 second round pick and a 2025 fifth round pick to New York. to make sure that their defensive line can handle, because again, really their defensive line when they were playing against the Rams, at least in week 1, was not looking super stellar. And obviously the Rams won that one pretty heavy-handedly. So any other thoughts? Geno Smith, he's fine. It's fine.
I mean, really good wide receiver trio that we locked down. We'll see if our DBs can do that again. Leonard Williams, really good D tackle, especially stopping the run. I think that's something Seattle needed, and it was a good pickup by them. A lot to spend for him, but I think he'll be worth it. Like in the second round, you're not gonna find much better of a D lineman than Leonard Williams. So you're basically spending a 5th round pick to pick up Leonard Williams. So I like it. That's about all.
Yeah, and this, we might have a couple more home games. This will be one of them that the Rams should hopefully have a steady crowd for. But we'll see. Hopefully a lot of you guys can actually get out to the game. Please, if you can go. Really support our Rams if you're in that LA area. Obviously, me and Ashton wish we could. We do our best when, they come to the East Coast. But yeah, we just want to try to fill that stadium. We want to see as much blue and yellow as we possibly can. Anything else you want to say, Ashton, before we kind of wrap things up as you take a drink?
Yeah, sorry. Getting thirsty. No. I think this team is lucky the NFC is so weak, and we do still have potential. It's not to the point where we have to win out. I think we can only lose 2 games. So there's 3 games that we're going to have to pick off one of the 3 really hard games left between the Browns, Ravens, and 49ers. Got to beat one of those teams.
And so this is a must. I mean, and then in that case, this is a must-win game.
Yes. The only games that are like nice to have, I would say, are the Ravens or 49ers.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, the success of this team this season is not going to be against their wins and losses. If they make the playoffs, that's obviously ideal, and we would want to see them. But this season has been successful outside of that. I mean, you look at our rookie class, and you look at who we have picked up: Steve Avila, Puka Nacua, Byron Young, Turner. We've picked up these great rookies, and they've all done amazing things as they are. So it's definitely not a failure of a season. Obviously, it's kind of disappointing that you're quote unquote wasting a year with Stafford, with Donald, and then you're kind of like the rookies who are making headlines. We're not seeing the fruition of more big plays, winning games, things like that. But I think that's still to come. I mean, our season does get lighter as we go on. Obviously, like we mentioned, we have at least 2 to 3 tough games that we're going to have to figure out if we can win those or not. But we have the potential. We have the will. We have the fan base. Everyone's been super awesome as we get to, discuss Rams every single week on all our social media platforms. So, hey, why don't I plug them? You can find us on X at East Coast Rams. You can find me at Zach Mayer. You can find Ashton at RamFanAshton1. You can find us on Instagram. Just search for East Coast Rams podcast. You can find us on Threads. YouTube, please. One of the biggest things that you can do for us is go subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is growing like none other, and we are so happy to finally hit over the 100 mark. And we've already gone up quite a bit since then. So thank you for everyone who listens. YouTube.com/at East Coast Rams. Please subscribe, smash that bell. Make sure you listen and watch every single episode that we put out. If you are an audio listener, we thank you as well. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify. We are on every single platform that we can possibly put ourselves on. So please make sure you subscribe, review, 5-star us, whatever you want to do. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week. Oh, sorry, Ashton, you want to add something in there?
Yeah, guys, comment down below what you think the Rams record will be after the bye. Go ahead and put those down, and we may read off some of your comments and kind of use it as a discussion point, hopefully after a win next week.
Yes, for our video listeners, please leave a comment down below. For those audio listeners, you can send us feedback questions to feedback@eastcoastrams.com as well. But yeah, we would love to know what your predictions are for the rest of the season. So please do that. So with that, I think that's going to wrap it up. We'll be back next week to talk about this week's episode, the recap of the week 11, talk about any of the breaking news that happens in between there, and then also talk about our next component, going to the desert, to Arizona. But until next time, guys, whose house? Rams house.